Goedemiddag.
Goedemiddag.
I'm here with youngbuck. He's from Copenhagen Wolves. I want to do one of my reflections interviews with you. And so I always have to start a bit historical, okay? I have to go back in time a little bit before we get to now. The first place I heard of you was actually when you got to join Absolute Legends. They became Curse. Because famously, people have always known Angush. Even if he was a good player, he was rager. Somehow he'd always get kicked out of his teams, okay? And you got to join instead of him for a while. And you were part of this team that was like, online, was a really good team, and people thought this is going to be one of the best teams in Europe. When you joined that team back then, was that really early on in your competitive experience, or had you played in other teams? What was it like?
I played a bit for a Dutch team, Lowland Lions, and played a bit in Belgium and the Netherlands, but nothing on a huge stage or anything.
What was it like to replace Angush there? Did they have a set plan in mind, like you have to play the same champions, the same style or anything?
No, they gave me a lot of freedom. They basically asked me which champions I like to play, and they just let me play whatever I wanted.
Because when you joined that team, I think part of the problem for you is that their team had been like gradually rising with Angush, and then you had to come in out of nowhere, and then you had to go to this MLG event, and it didn't go so great at the event. You lost to the two CLG teams. Was there a lot of pressure on you to do well at the time, you think?
At the time I didn't feel much pressure, but I was very nervous, and I remember my hands shaking a lot before the matches, so yeah. It kind of shows how much pressure there actually was, but I didn't really feel like I had to perform at that moment.
I know everyone, even names who people don't know as star names, if you've played enough solo queue and you've played enough ranked, you've probably played every famous player in Europe at some point anyway, even if you're not on the top teams. So aside from nerves of like first big lands and stuff, were you perfectly fine playing against like people in CLG, NA, and playing against like Froggen and these sorts of, you didn't have any intimidation there?
I did, especially against the stars of America at that time. I know I did very bad against Dyrus because I was so nervous and I looked up to him, so it was very difficult for me. However, we also played some lesser known teams and I did very well against those.
Wasn't one of the teams you played against, the Legion team, wasn't that the team who had like Wild Turtle or someone played top lane?
I remember playing against Zion Spartan top lane and demolishing him.
Yeah.
That's my best moment of that year.
Because I mean, people will know him now. He's in Coast now. Was he a good player back then? What did you think of him?
It's difficult to say from just the matches we played, but I remember him having a lot of synergy with his jungler. And the first game I got away with some 1v1 kills and snowballed very hard, but the second and third game I remember his jungler coming a lot, and he also proxy farmed at that time, which was kind of uncommon.
Yeah, sure. When we think of that era, because after that era, when Angush came back to the lineup, they brought him back in. For a while, you weren't seen on like the pro level. I remember that was the time when there was all this stuff behind closed doors, like, oh, you're going to join SK, and they were trying you out there. And then that didn't happen, like you didn't officially join. So then no one saw you for a while. You were playing in like lower teams. How close were you to getting into SK, do you think?
I think it was pretty close, even though I wasn't that happy with my own performance, but I was dealing with a lot of self-confidence issues from being kicked from Curse. So it kind of got to me. It definitely affected my performance, even though I still think it was on a decent level. But at that time, SK just got the option to get a yellow star as AD carry, but all they had to do was move Kevin back to top lane, and it's the best decision for them.
Because even though obviously people will know now Kevin's always had his spot as one of the best, well, at the time I remember some people were actually mad when you didn't get picked up. They thought like, oh, youngbuck for sure is going to get a chance to join this team, like he has potential. Where were you as a player then? Did you rate yourself personally as a good player? You thought you should be in that team? What did you think?
I think I was good enough for SK, but SK at the time also was in a bit of a slump. So it's a little bit hard to tell. I do remember playing a few good matches and actually carrying them into the, I think it was IM Katowice qualifier. I single-handedly carried that. And then 1 week before the event I got kicked, so that was a little bit hurtful.
So what happened after that period then? Because like I say, I remember like, oh, I was hearing like, I was actually at SK around that time, like, oh, youngbuck for sure is going to join. Then you didn't, but you didn't really join like another top team at the time. You were like around like the level just below. So what was going on with you at the time? Were you still fully into trying to be a pro in League?
I was still trying. I made my own lineup early in August or at the end of July, and we qualified for a small LAN event where we actually had to play SK and beat them, so that felt pretty good. But we disbanded right after the event because we weren't really too happy with each other and we were missing a jungler. Then I went on to play for Dragonborns, but that was just a disaster. It's just not everyone was on the same line of how they wanted to deal with things and how serious they were. So me and Shuk went out, and then I got an offer from Mouse to make a lineup for them. And that was actually a pretty good lineup, and we were looking to qualify. We were really one of the strongest teams in Europe. But about a week before the qualifier, Shu got banned, and he was our most important player, and we couldn't find a good replacement for him.
Since you were in 2 of the LCS qualifiers and you didn't make it in, I don't want this to sound like a biased question, but do you think there's anything needs to be changed about the qualifier system? Because what I've noticed is every qualifier, the teams on paper who look like the best, there's always 1 or 2 of them who don't get in. So like Samurai and Jeans, everyone was telling me like they're definitely going to get in, don't worry about it. I remember in the first one when you were in Mouse Sports, everyone was like, oh, don't worry, Millennium are getting in, like, you know, alternate, these are all going to get in. None of these teams get in, and there's usually a surprise team who always get in. Mm-hmm. Is there something about like the way the qualifiers set up that means the best don't always get in? What do you think?
Well, the first qualifier was definitely very flawed in their setup. Like, eventually 4 of the weakest teams actually in the entire tournament made it through and got into the LCS. With a best of 1 format in group stage, it didn't make much sense. The second qualifier did show a lot of improvement. However, Samurai and Jeans vs Wolf at the time was probably like the rank 5 and 4 team of Europe. Had to face each other, and one had to go out, and that was unfortunately us. The last qualifier was a bit better because the pro teams actually got to pick who they wanted to play. But maybe something like a round robin between the LCS teams and the relegation teams might have been even better.
Oh, okay. Because that's one of the things that seems to be a flaw, which is that on paper, if every team kept the same lineup, okay, the system would probably be quite good how it is now, because the idea is you have a whole amateur season that'll determine the seeds, and then that determines who you'll probably get to play out of the relegated teams. But the real problem is everyone changes lineup constantly, and so it doesn't matter how you did, because you might be in the worst seeded team, but you have the best team, and you get these weird matchups like that. How close was Samurai and Jeans really to getting into LCS that time, do you think?
Wow, I think we would have 3-0'd any other team. And I don't think anyone else who had scrimmed us would have said anything different. I remember being 17 wins, 2 losses against MIM the week before in scrims, and 10-1 against Dragonborns. And those teams actually had to play each other for a spot, and the only team that was actually close to us was the current Lemon Dogs. They could actually beat us and go even with us. But all the other teams, they didn't even stand a chance in scrims.
In that case, since Lemon Dogs, I mean, they did change your player, they changed Mithy during the season. They were like the shock of that season. Were they already near the level of being good back when you were playing them in the amateur scene?
They were very strategically, they were strong in strategics and tactics, and they really had a different kind of approach to the games and found counters to things that people were playing that no one thought of, and that made them very strong at that time.
When you saw, I mean, the joke of your team being called Samurai and Jeans was supposedly like, if we get picked up, then we're just going to be ninjas in pajamas, so that's why we're even calling ourselves like that. And so instead, you didn't get picked up, and the Copenhagen Wolves get the NIP spot instead. If you think back now, since you're in LCS anyway now, would that team, if it had gone into LCS, would it really have been a top team? Would you have been hung around the bottom? What do you think the sense was for Samurai and Jeans, that lineup?
At that time, it was around top 5 team, I think, based on the scrim results. However, I've already noticed that scrim results and actually LCS games are not even close.
Okay. There's just teams who always do well, and there's Fnatic who do terribly now, and everyone. It's really like that.
Like defeating Gambit an entire week and then just getting shit stomped at the LCS.
Fair enough. So, if there was this long period then, basically all of last year, where you're trying to get into LCS, it doesn't work, and then you have to go through all these small tournaments to get another chance, and then it doesn't work. How do you stay motivated to do it? Were there ever times you thought like maybe that was my last one, like I'm just not going to be an LCS player?
That didn't really cross my mind, and luckily there was always a very short time between the teams, so I didn't get much to think. But I've definitely had the thought in my mind that am I good enough? Like, you start to doubt yourself a lot when you keep failing and just not hitting that what you want to hit. Was there ever any? One of the things I always wonder about players who are just below the level of being in the top teams is, do you ever start to think like why don't I ever get asked to join a top team? Like when they have a spot free, why aren't they recruiting me? Like, would you ever wonder that? Were you ever close to joining any teams? There were a few times where I thought that why aren't they asking me? I remember NIP looking for a new top laner, and then they got a
Mima.
Yeah, they got him as a solo. He was a solo queue player who only played assassins, and they forced him to play tanks, especially the Shen, which is Shen is my champion. Yeah. I was probably known to be the best Shen in Europe, and I was like, why didn't you just ask me? Would have been a lot better for you guys and for me.
So the strange thing is, I started the story in season 2 with the Curse EU time. In season 2, all the famous top laners were guys who were like, they were the solo star of their team. It was like Mark Noon, it was like they were just doing whatever they wanted, you know. They were playing like AP champions. They were doing, basically, it seemed like they did anything they wanted. They were the superstars. And you were saying there, you played Shen. You were famous back then, as like the Shen player, the Renekton player, these are, I mean, Shen isn't played very much now, but these were like the tanks back then. Now is like the tank meta. Everyone has to play, even Soaz has to play tanks. Is this just like the time for you to be a top laner?
Not really, because most of the tanks I don't really connect with. Only Renekton is someone I really connect with, and Shen, but he's not played that much.
Yeah.
I hate playing Mundo, and I hate playing against it. There's just something about him that pisses me off. It's probably his ultimate that you can't kill him. And well, Trundle actually fits me quite well, but Shyvana, I didn't really have a feeling with her. So I've been trying to pick up some weird champions, and I have some very specific counter picks for strange champions, and I hope I get to show them soon.
Soaz, and let's face it, it's Soaz, so he's going to say this. He says like tanks take no skill to play, and that's why he hates top lane now, and he wants to play like, you know, Kennen, he wants to play these champions. Are they limited in how they can be used? What, like, there must be some, like if I watch Zora Zero, he looks like a very good player, so he's doing something with these champions. What kind of a skill set does a tank have now at the top lane?
Well, you don't need a lot of mechanics for a top lane. It's more about decision making, knowing your matchups, and I think I'm stronger than that. Than I'm at my mechanics. They're probably a little bit below those of the top players in LCS. So in that scenario, champions like Renekton are perfect for me. Don't require a lot of mechanics, but more decision making.
You said that you don't really like Mundo, okay? So many people will make it sound like, oh, Mundo is the most broken champion, like it's impossible to kill him and stuff. In that case, shouldn't you just be trying to play Mundo every time then? If it's so broken, take it away from the other guy. I'll use it and it's broken.
I don't necessarily think it's broken, and I do play it, but I don't like the champion. I don't like to play against his kit. It doesn't feel fun to play against.
Because there is this like consensus now that every top player says, oh, I have to play the tanks, or nearly every game. Mm-hmm. But I've seen sometimes, like Flame from Blaze, sometimes if he has the right comp, he can go Nidalee top, he can play Riven top. He doesn't necessarily win the whole game with it, but he can play them and doesn't get killed. Mm-hmm. Is there more room than people think to play other champions? It doesn't have to just be super tanks?
I think there's a lot of room right now. And a lot of top laners are trying to fill that gap and trying to look for new champions that actually counter those champions. And I've tried some myself as well. I've tried Darius and Wukong. It's with average success, and I've tried another champion, a Poppy, with good success actually, and I hope I get to show her soon.
With the way the tank scales in League of Legends at the moment, it seems like unless you totally kill the team early, in the end of the game, you will need a tank in the team somewhere. Does it have to be the top lane? Can you not just have a different champion at top and the jungler goes super tanky, the support goes super tanky? Could we not have the tank?
Very often you see that there's a jungler also being very tanky, and sometimes the support like Thresh and Leona and even Annie with her E can be very tanky, so I don't think you necessarily have to play a tank in top lane. They're just a little bit stronger than most of the current picks.
When you changed to this Copenhagen Wolves team, the storyline coming into this season is kind of strange because every fan who didn't know much about the amateur scene really just thought of Copenhagen Wolves as like the place where Reckles waits to become really good and join Fnatic, and when he leaves, they're going to be dead, you know, because he was the superstar. Did you really know that, like, we'll be able to get another AD carry, we can still be a good team? Did you ever worry, like, okay, Reckles is really good now, but what do we do when he leaves? Was it ever a concern?
I wasn't worried that much about replacing Reckless, even though later on I did get a bit worried, but Shug was more of a threat. I mean, we didn't expect him to leave, and then suddenly at Bucharest, also the last event with Reckless, he just said, hey guys, I got a huge offer that I'm considering, so it just came out of nowhere, and we actually had a few AD carries already in mind. We even asked Puzu, but at the moment he said that he had a few other offers and had to think about it, and we didn't hear back from him, so we just started trying out some solo queue players, and then we landed with Forgiven eventually.
Okay, because the thing is, with that storyline of how that was, people, especially when Shuk was leaving as well, people were like, fans thought, oh, the team must be worse now then. But I remember coming into the promotion, I was talking to people in NIP and teams like this who had a very good chance to get back in, and they were telling me like, no, we won't be picking Copenhagen Wolves. They're like the best of all the amateur teams. Was the new team really just instantly that good?
I think it was even better than the last lineup, but as we show now, we're a bit more inconsistent and individually slightly weaker, and we compensated that with better team play, but as of now in the LCS, that's our weakness, so we have a lot to fix. In
what sense does the team work better together then? Because like on paper, a lot of these players aren't star players, like they're not Reckless, they're not Shook, etc. But what overall do you think works a bit better?
I think that with Reckless, we always focused on bot lane and getting him fed, and I was just there waiting with a teleport, and I didn't get much room to show any skill or anything. And with this team, we balance it a lot more and we allow other people to be able to carry and win their lanes. So like Koudart has been able to play a lot more champions recently and doesn't have to pick champions just for Reckless to be able to farm up. And the same goes to me.
I want to ask about a few of the top laners in Europe who are the famous names, because fans will all have like an opinion they agree on, but that's not necessarily, when you play someone, you might have a different sense, okay? So if I say Wicked, people right now are going to be like, well, he keeps building Trinity Force on Malphite, what's he doing? Like, oh, he thinks it's 2012 or something. What is Wicked like now compared, because you've even played him back in the old days, what's Wicked like now? What are his problems? What is he good at?
He's still one of the hardest top laners to play against for me, especially because in weak matchups, he's very good at farming and just staying even in CS even when he shouldn't. However, he definitely has a weakness in his champion pool, there's no denying that, and he keeps trying weird things that don't make much sense and tries to stay away from the tanks that are so strong. So I hope he changes his champion pool for his team's sake, but overall he's a very good player.
When people kept mentioning that Malphite build, the funny thing is when he used it at Battle of the Atlantic and they won, everyone was like, what a genius move. But then when it did badly, everyone was like, it doesn't make any sense. He gave his reasons, right, as like, I did it because I thought damage was better here, like I wouldn't have won if I'd have built tank then anyway. Can you understand the logic as to why he builds Trinity Force on Malphite?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you try to play against a Trundle, you can't really afford to buy any tank items because it just makes a Trundle stronger and have an easier lane. So I understand that he was building AD. I'm not sure if I would have rushed the Sheen or the Triforce in itself, maybe another item, but I can understand he didn't go the tank route.
You said there, like, he doesn't want to play certain tanks, and that has always been like the famous thing about Wicked, like, oh, he's so stubborn. If he decides he doesn't want to play a champion, he'll just say, no, it's bad, and he'll never play it. If I could take him and brainwash him, and I could like show him movies of like, this is how you should play, always play Renekton, always play Dr. Munda, always play Shyvana, always go tank. If I brainwashed him like this, he'd suddenly be the best top laner in Europe?
No, I don't think he's mechanically quite there with SOAS and Zoro at the moment. But he would be a second tier top laner.
So if we talk about SOAS, ever since CLG fell off a bit, and so Wicked wasn't thought of as the automatic top laner because he used to be the best team of those who had really good tops, people used to always say, okay, right, now SOAS is number one because he can play every champion. He has like the sexiest style in that sense. What is SOAS good at, and where does he stack up for you?
Definitely a very broad champion pool, and he knows every single matchup. He has no weakness in any matchup, and that's very difficult to find in a top laner that doesn't have any kind of weakness in any champion. Any champion he plays, he's just as good as any other player.
So when you go against him, is it really the case that even from scrims you don't know what he's going to play, or do you have a sense of how to play him now?
Especially in scrims it's harder, but in LCS matches he does seem to kind of stay in the normal champion pool range and doesn't go crazy, but I've laned against his Fiddlesticks a few weeks ago, so that's kind of a strange things that you probably never get to see, but he's definitely capable of playing it.
Because the thing is, the hype around Zoro, especially recently when they were about to qualify for LCS, was like, oh, he's the best top laner. But since everyone keeps telling me every top laner just plays tanks and they all seem quite similar, how can we identify Zoro as so good? What's he so good at that other people aren't, or what's he ahead at?
He even out-CSs in bad matchups, and I've played him a lot last week, and I don't know how he does it, but every time I look at the scoreboard, he's just even in CS, even in matchups that he shouldn't even be close to even. So I still don't know how he does it, but his decision-making and mechanics are just on another level.
Who out of the guys, like we've got all these teams who people aren't going to know, Super Hot Crew, most people didn't even really know KMT, even though they were around in the scene, and Nexus and all those. Got your team. Who are the guys of the less well-known top laners? Who are the ones that really stand out to you? Is there someone who like, he should be famous, this guy's really good?
Oh, I need to think about that.
It doesn't even have to be an LCS necessarily. It might be an amateur person. Who would you pick?
It's really difficult. I'm not really impressed by most of the challenger top laners. Even though Zaxxas has been doing very well, but in the challenger scene he was always a very mediocre top laner actually. So he just stepped up his game tremendously. So if I have to say someone, I'd say Zaxxas, even though I'm not that impressed by him.
Okay. A strange one was because of the story around Alliance, and the whole storyline was like, oh, they wanted JWoww. He was going to be like, same as with Shook when people didn't know Shook. The reason he got hype is because Froggen told everyone, oh, he's the best jungler. So people heard the same about JWoww and they were like, oh, he's going to be the next star. And we saw he went to this Ocelot team and it went pretty badly. Was he overhyped?
Definitely. He was very overhyped. He just had a jungler that always camped his top lane, so he could play anything he wanted. He usually played assassins and could carry, just like we had Reckless doing that, and we always camped the bot lane, and they had the Naruto camping the top lane, so JWoww could get away with anything.
So it was having Shook playing with him, basically.
Yes.
When we go forwards from here, and we're still like, for anyone who watches this in a few weeks, we're still like early on in the LCS season. When you came into this season and you knew like Gambit might be better with Edward now, Fnatic has got Reckless, Alliance at the time everyone thought was going to be like one of the best teams. Did you really have a goal like, okay, if we finish 4th, that'd be good. If we finish 5th, where were you really realistically thinking?
The goal was to survive the split. The dream was top 4, but I think we actually ranked ourselves at 3rd.
Ah, okay. Who did you have above yourselves?
We have Fnatic and Gambit above us.
So you already knew at this time like we could be better than Alliance?
Actually, I need to correct myself. We thought that Alliance and Fnatic were better than us.
Okay.
Because we had really good results against Gambit. We didn't expect them to be so overwhelmingly strong in the LCS.
Right.
And I don't know what else to say.
So one of the few top lanes we haven't talked about yet is Darien. And at the moment he's really popular. Sometimes not even for his in-game play, just for the memes and stuff. You played against Darien even going back in time. Who is Darien? He seems like a strange guy. I don't really understand it.
Yeah, he's quite a special top laner. He's not really the 1v1 kind of top laner, but he does a little bit strange things and is very annoying to play against, and proxies at weird times, and play some weird champions. Sometimes, like picking Warwick against us because we're the Wolves. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just he's a very special kind of top laner.
Since it's tying this into what you said about JWoww, okay. So JWoww looked really good when he had Shook there. The problem is we've never seen Darien playing without Diamond Prox. And Diamond Prox is like maybe the most dangerous jungler because you never know where he's going to be and he's so good at his ganks. What is it like to play against Darien with Diamond Prox involved? How does he affect the matchup when you're playing 1v1 with Darien? I'm
not that afraid of Diamond Prox because he usually doesn't gank top that much, and I do keep that in mind. I usually tend to see him around mid lane, and that's usually where the problems come, because then Alex gets ahead and he starts roaming top lane, and that's actually what I do keep in mind.
Ah, right. Is that different from how other teams do it, you think?
Most of the times, yes. I don't see any other team camping mid lane just so they could roam to top lane. Usually you see them roaming to bot lane.
When you think of the team you have now in Wolves, there's a weird scenario here, okay, because the way LCS was designed to work, you can only have one team, okay? So even if Fnatic had $1 million, they can only have one team in the LCS per season. And so it means organizations like Wolves, and last season we had Velocity, and we have some of these small organizations that if they qualify, they get a spot. But then we end up in this weird scenario where Lemon Dogs were the best team in Europe, but because they're a smaller organization, they lose their team. And so we got this weird scenario where like, how can the best team leave the organization? Do you think right now, all the teams in Europe can be at the level where they keep all their teams? Like we're never going to have to worry about like Rockout losing their team to a better organization or something. Is there still a disparity between like Fnatic, Gambit, these top organizations and the bottom ones? What's the gap like?
I don't think there's necessarily a gap between the organizations. It's more the personality of players, and some of them are just not loyal, or I think some people are prepared to put their career ahead of their friends, and sometimes you have to do it, and sometimes it's a little bit unreasonable, some kicks that happen and some people leaving for weird teams. In general, I don't think we're stable yet.
Because the Lemon Dogs one is the famous example, because once they failed to qualify for LCS, then every fan who was mad that they left Lemon Dogs could be like, I told you that you deserve that, you left your team. Can you understand why they left the Lemon Dogs team and didn't just keep that same 5?
I knew that they actually didn't want to leave right after Worlds, but okay. The scenario with NIP just happened out of the blue when Bjergsen wanted to leave and he had to find a new mid laner for NIP, and then Nukedog was contacted. It was just something that happened out of the blue. I can definitely understand them. We also had an offer from Lemon Dogs to join them before Battle of Atlantic, but we just knew it was such an amateuristic organization. We were never going to join that, even if we had a guaranteed LCS spot.
The strange thing about LCS is because the first split doesn't qualify you for Worlds, even though obviously you're trying to win the split for the money and you're trying to stay in the split, there's a weird scenario where it's almost like you described there, like the #1 goal is just survive. Because if you can survive till summer, no matter what happens, then you can qualify for Worlds, okay? But it means that before Worlds comes around, you've got a long time to improve, to get experience. If as it is right now, you're certain, yeah, we'll definitely be in Worlds. Like we've got enough time. We'll be one of the top 3 teams when it comes around.
I'm not too sure about that. Going into the LCS, I did think that we had the potential to be top 3 and maybe even number 1. However, lately we have been having some issues and things aren't really going the way that we're used to. So it's really hard to tell what will happen to us.
Right, for my last question, I like to do like hypotheticals, okay? It's like my thing. And so I have a unique one for you actually, which is that I found out that you were a fan of MMA. And I could tell anyway when you made a team and called it Pride FC because that was like the best organization ever. So what I want to do is like this. I'll name a famous MMA fighter and you can pick when at whatever point of time. And I want you to give me like the League of Legends pro, who either his personality or his style. You just say like, that's who, you know, like, I'll give you an example now. I'm not going to use Brock Lesnar, but if I said that, you'd say like, oh, Brock Lesnar, so-and-so is the Brock Lesnar of League of Legends. You'll give me a name, okay, for each.
Okay.
So we'll just start off with a really good one. Mirko Krokop.
Ah, my favorite.
Who would be him in League of Legends?
Wow, you're probably looking at a cold killer, so who could that be? I think Forgiven.
Forgiven?
Yeah,
Okay.
he has this mean look, like he's like an evil person and he's really quiet and just very efficient at what he does.
Okay, so Fedor.
Fedor, wow, then Fedor.
The best.
The best, the very best ever. So who's the best ever? And personality-wise, it wouldn't be Expeke, but result-wise, it would be. Personality-wise, it's really hard to say.
But your results for you, Expeke is just the best ever.
I think he's the best mid laner ever and the best
wow.
player in the EU ever. He just consistently wins every lane, every matchup, and has just a huge impact on every game he plays.
Okay. Right, how about, we'll go some new school ones now. So I'll say like John Jones.
Ah, John Jones, okay.
What are you thinking of when you say it?
I'm just trying to go through the list of players and then coming up with them. I'm thinking overhyped. I don't like him.
You don't? Okay.
No, I'm not a big John Jones fan.
Okay.
Let's see. John Jones. Who do I not like in the LCS? I wouldn't be afraid to give a name.
Okay.
But there's not anyone in LCS that I say I don't like him.
Not even in LCSNA or something?
How about?
There's no one cocky you think, you know?
No, not really.
Okay.
I don't really follow NA that much, so I don't have much of an opinion about that. How about Svenskeren?
Svenskeren, okay.
Yes, overhyped and I don't like him.
Fair enough. Right, let me think, who else shall I go with? Okay, let's do Anderson Silva then.
Anderson Silva.
Another classic name.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll have like an old school guy who used to be the best or something.
Exactly, I'm thinking of someone whose career is going to end soon. Actually, even though I like N-rated a lot, I think that SK won't make it through this split, and he's been an old dog that probably won't make it anymore.
Fair enough. Okay, I've got one for you. Chael Sonnen.
Ah, he's one of my favorites.
Yeah, he's great, isn't he?
Can I take that one? I like trash talking in very creative ways, and I quote him a lot as well when I'm just playing with my team and doing weird things.
You like his personality?
Yeah, I like how he's trash talking, outspoken, but also he's very smart. He's not just talking random shit. He's very well spoken.
Okay, so the last one, I'll just give you one who's like a good name. So, Lyoto Machida, because he's such a unique guy, you know.
How about Darien then? He's a special top laner, and Machida has a very different style than most people, so I'm going to give that one to Darien. Okay, good one, good one. Okay, so do you have anyone you want to thank or say hello to at the end of the interview? Yeah, I want to thank Copenhagen Wolves, Steel Series, Complete, and Obuto for your support, and I want to thank my fans, friends, and family. Dankjewel. Graag gedaan.